Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Advocate Weekly, your go-to podcast for the latest in LGBTQ plus news and culture. I'm your host, Kevin Ortega-Rojas. Today is April 2nd, 2025, and this week we're celebrating a major win for The Advocate and diving into some major developments in politics and media. Plus, later in the show, we'll be joined by Advocate's senior national reporter Christopher Wiggins, as well as our special guest, activist, author, organizer, and speaker, Hope Giselle-Godsey. We have a lot to get into this week, so let's get started. Kicking things off with some exciting news, The Advocate won Outstanding Magazine Overall Coverage at this year's GLAAD Media Awards. This prestigious honor recognizes The Advocate's long-time commitment to amplifying LGBTQ plus voices and reporting on issues that matter the most to our community. This award is a testament to the hard work of everyone involved in producing the magazine's content in print and online, including its writers, editors, and contributors who ensure that LGBTQ plus stories remain front and center. Congratulations to the entire Advocate team. Turning now to Capitol Hill, where Senator Cory Booker made history last night, protesting the Trump administration by delivering a marathon speech on the Senate floor. Booker, who is a longtime advocate for civil liberties and equal rights, invoked the Stonewall riots in his speech as he spoke about the power of the people to make a difference. Here's that moment.
What did they do when they faced violence? Well, look at the people at Stonewall who stood up, who pushed back, who organized, who won. What do they do when the dogs are unleashed on us, the fire hose are unleashed on us? Look at what they did in Selma.
Senator Booker held the floor for 25 hours and 4 minutes, setting the record for the longest speech in Senate history. Moving on now, we turn to immigration. A gay hairdresser was wrongfully deported to an El Salvadorian prison after immigration officials claimed that his tattoos were gang-related. Andres Jose Hernandez Romero, an asylum seeker, was going through the proper channels to attain legal status here in the United States. Unfortunately, his tattoos were scrutinized by the Department of Homeland Security, which has begun using an arbitrary point system to determine whether or not an undocumented person is a gang member based on things like their tattoos, making them eligible for deportation without due process. This is one of the many stories coming out of El Salvador where the Trump administration's eagerness to deport undocumented people and asylum seekers en masse is resulting in wrongful arrests. Andres' family has not been able to get in contact with him, and the Trump administration is saying that they cannot retrieve anyone who is currently being held in Salvadorian custody. Hopefully, we'll get an update soon. When we come back, we'll be joined by the Advocate's senior national reporter, Christopher Wiggins, to get an update on Trump's attacks on the transgender military service members. Okay, and we are back with the Advocate's senior national reporter, Christopher Wiggins, to give us an update on some really important issues. Christopher, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me back.
Of course, you are one of my favorite people to talk to. You have been keeping everyone abreast of the issues pertaining to Donald Trump and the way that he's been targeting trans people, specifically in the military. So we talked a little bit about that before, and I wanted to get into the updates because I know that there have been a few. I'm really interested to talk about the trans troops themselves, as well as the appeals court and the updates that have been happening there. So where should we start?
I think a good place to start might be where we left off last time, which was right before I went to court to listen to the case being argued for a preliminary injunction, right? And so that was a few weeks ago. It became very clear that the judge was not at all interested in hearing excuses from the Department of Justice. The attorney who was arguing that day actually admitted that he hadn't read any of the reports that the government was relying on to base its ban on transgender members of the military on. So the judge excoriated him and said, well, we're going to go ahead and pause for a half hour. You're going to read this and we're going to go through the report together. So that's kind of where the day started. And it went downhill from there for the government. The judge exposed that there is no increased cost to the government on gender affirming care compared to, for example, Viagra, which she cited statistics that said is 8 times more money is spent by the federal government on ED medication than on gender affirming care. She pointed out that there is no reason for trans members of the military to be excluded because of any kind of mental health problems compared to people, cisgender people who have depression. Trans people are more deployable and have occur in less instances of any kind of condition that would keep them from being deployed. So she basically unraveled the entire argument that the government was making to eliminate trans people from the military. It did not surprise me then when a week later she did rule in favor of the transgender plaintiffs and said that, she said in her ruling that the policy was dripping in animus and or dripping in pretext and soaked in animus. She did not hold back. She really saw that what this is about is the government excluding a group of people just because the chief executive doesn't like that group of people. There is no reason to be excluding trans people. So fast forward, so at that hearing, in the breaks, I got to know some of the plaintiffs in the case. There are 32 at this point in this case, but 3 of them for which I wrote profiles that are on advocate.com now, uh, they really impressed me. One of them is Nick Talbot. He is a second lieutenant in the Army, and he is the lead plaintiff in this case. Another is Major Erica Vandal. She is a major, as I just said, in the Army. Her dad was a lieutenant general. Her brothers are both fighter pilots in the Navy and in the Marine Corps. She went to West Point. She has been leading troops all over the world. She's part of a legacy family that calls it the Plan. I mean, she is military through and through and through. And, they're trying to kick her out. And then there's Clayton McAllister, who is a really impressive young man. He's 24 years old. He has a wife and a daughter. The daughter is 2 years old now. Um, he is an Air Force recruit. He has trained and trained and trained for an elite unit, a para-rescue unit, which are people who want to jump out of perfectly fine airplanes to save other people, right? So, it has an incredibly high attrition rate, and he has been training physically with special warfare operators to join the Air Force. He was accepted in. He was supposed to take his oath and ship out for training, and that has been on pause. And this particular specialization only has a few classes a year. So the more that it's delayed for him to go into that, the more unlikely it is for him to actually get a spot in that field. And he is of the persuasion that military service overall is what he wants to do. So he's willing to take any other position, but he shouldn't have to, right? Because he has done the work to be considered for this elite unit. And so, what I've come to learn from really spending time talking to these remarkable Americans is that they have ingrained in them that they want to serve, and they have proven that they excel not just to the standard but beyond any standard, right? They are not asking for any sort of special considerations. um Their medical care is very simple. Nick Talbot takes a shot every 2 weeks himself. Major Vandal takes a pill, and Clayton McAllister also just takes medication. So the whole argument about transgender people not being medically fit, or being somehow morally bankrupt, or trying to get one over on folks, is just so false and based on bigotry, and the courts seem to be stepping in to really call that out.
Yeah, it's really interesting how much misinformation has been able to be peddled by the Trump White House when it comes to this specific group of people. And I remember, you pointed out to us a couple weeks ago that trans people are more likely to serve,
Yeah.
which I did not know. And I wonder, do you think that the information that's coming out of these court hearings and coming out of this ruling, is it reaching the general public, or is this sort of happening in a vacuum? Because while it's good, do you think that what this judge is exposing and what they're talking about will permeate?
I think, that's a great question. I think that given the results of the Wisconsin Supreme Court election today, in which the liberal Judge Susan Crawford beat the conservative opponent in a landslide, it does make me believe that people are paying attention to judges, right? Because judges have been standing in the way of a lot of the most extreme policies that the Trump administration has tried to implement. I don't know if people are really honed in on the specifics of these cases, of the trans military cases, but I will say that the judges, both Judge Reyes here in Washington D.C. and Judge Settle in Washington State, who has ruled on a preliminary injunction in favor of transgender defendants in a second parallel case. Um, in their opinions, they are really outlining in very simple language what they think is going on here, right? And so they are saying, this is bigotry. There is no evidence for this. And the way that they are going about writing these opinions, they're interesting to read. They're great reads. I would recommend everyone to go and read them. They're really fun to read, but it's one of those things where if they can break through by using simple language and pointing out what's really going on here and framing it in such a way that people can understand, right? People hold folks who serve in the military in this country in high regard. Thank you for your service is something that people throw around a lot, right? I think most people mean it sincerely. A lot of people, it is performative. But, when you consider the high regard in which people hold folks in the military, and you then present them with stories like Nick and Erica and Clayton, it makes them wonder, well, why are we kicking these people who really want to serve out? Like, why? What is the justification for any of this? So, to your point, I hope people are paying attention. I hope it's breaking through. But I admitted this to you recently. I live in a DC bubble, and I was at Howard University on election night, convinced that we were seeing history in the making. And so I'm not really good at predictions any longer. I've decided, but I do think that if people give this a chance and learn about these people, which is the most important part, the stories of these people and not the policies, they will come to understand why this really matters.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I obviously, we're here on the Advocate Weekly, and we're, amplifying the stories that you and so many other incredible writers at Advocate write. So of course the stories are out there. And Equal Pride and Out Magazine and so many other publications are doing the work, obviously. But I think knowing that the tactic in DC is to flood the zone, and knowing that people today are concerned about tariffs, and yesterday people were tuned into Cory Booker and all of the things. I worry that these stories, these really important stories, may get lost. But hopefully, talking about it here and reminding people that these stories are on advocate.com will get them to really dig into it and then know that they're there, so that when they meet someone, they can correct whatever misinformation they're hearing by saying, well, just read this. The stories are out there. Christopher Wiggins wrote it for us.
Yeah, well, that's definitely something that people ought to be leaning into, right? Seeking out information about these issues. They can, as you said graciously, you can find it on advocate.com. We get cited a lot in other large publications too about our coverage. So the word is getting out there. I hope that especially members of the LGBTQ community as a whole will consume this information in a way that informs them and allows them to bond together closely, because there is this movement from the right that's trying to fracture the LGB from the TQ plus. And that is a tactic that is not helpful. It is based on bigotry and internalized transphobia and homophobia. And it's really something that I urge folks who are part of the LGBT community and who wonder, well, why are we associating our struggle with the struggle of transgender people, to really consider, reading some of this information and understanding their history and why the struggle for equal rights is one that we all share.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Well, thank you for all that. Is there anything that you have your eyes on right now? Any stories or updates that we should be looking out for coming up?
I'm really looking for the Supreme Court opinion in the Scrimetti case to be announced. I mean, that's down the road in June. But I'm really looking at the Supreme Court as far as whether it steps in and blocks some of these preliminary injunctions that judges are putting in place that are stopping the Trump administration from some of their most offensive actions, right? The courts really are stepping in and blocking everything from disappearing people off the street by I mean, imagine this. There are masked groups of goons running around and stripping people off the street in this country. And there are people erasing transgender people from websites in this country. I mean, it's really dystopian. And so when you consider that the courts are stepping in, I'm really watching the Supreme Court on all of this. And when they do hear these cases, you can expect me to be there.
All right. Well, I look forward to more updates. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully you'll be back on soon.
Thanks. Have a good one.
And we're back with some more headlines you need to know. The White House Press Association fired Amber Ruffin from hosting this year's Correspondents' Dinner, a decision that has sparked outrage among the LGBTQ+ community and advocates. Amber Ruffin, a queer black comedian, is known for her sharp wit and her commentary on race and gender issues. She was reportedly removed after a Trump official objected to her political tone. Well, Amber Ruffin responded last night on Seth Meyers. Take a listen.
That when bad people do bad things, you have to treat them fairly and respectfully. When you watch The Sound of Music, you have to root for the singing children and the other people.
You mean the Nazis?
Calling them that is so one-sided.
Don't you think you're exaggerating?
For now.
I mean, it's just the whole reason we have a free press is so we can report stories, as they actually happen.
No, we have a free press so that we can be nice to Republicans at fancy dinners. The point is that you're sowing the seeds of discord. And I used to be the same way. I thought, when people take away your rights, erase your history, and deport your friends, you're supposed to call it out. But I was wrong. Glad to find that out now, because if they had let me give that speech, ooh, baby, I would have been so terrifically mean.
Just burning everyone?
I would have been on one. Anywho, don't have time to teach you all this. I gotta go.
Yeah, where are you going?
I have to return the dress I was gonna wear to the Correspondents' Dinner. I already took the tags off, but I'm gonna just say they blew off in the wind.
Yeah, but that's lying, Amber. That's wrong.
You can't say that. That's journalism.
Switching gears now to some entertainment news, Hulu's original series is making history, centering 3 gay men as its lead characters. Mid-Century Modern is centered on a trio of BFFs who are deemed, quote, gay gentlemen of a certain age. After losing a dear friend, the 4th member of their group, the 3 characters decide that they need to spend their, quote, golden years together living under the same roof in Palm Springs.
We're women of a certain age. We're alone. We're miserable.
I'm not miserable.
Trust me, you're miserable. You're too poor for New York. You hate Atlanta.
I like Atlanta.
You hate it. Why don't you know this? You'll both move in with me.
And there it is. Bunny Schneiderman's Veni Vidi Vici. Do it fast, do it now, do it wrong.
Arthur, this one makes sense. We never see each other.
We FaceTime every night.
I use a filter. It's barely even me.
The sitcom stars Matt Bomer, Nathan Lane, and Nathan Lee Graham, and the first season is available to stream now on Hulu. And finally, let's talk about research and science, which is being impacted by the Trump administration. After years of hard work, Annalise Mennick and her team at UNC Charlotte were awarded a research grant last May. They've been researching how to improve the mental health outcomes for LGBTQ+ survivors of sexual abuse. Unfortunately, less than a year later, that grant has been rescinded due to an executive order signed by President Trump and the policies of his administration. The grant was canceled because of its focus on LGBTQ+ people. This is one of about 70 known NIH research grants focusing on LGBTQ+ health that have been canceled since Donald Trump took office, stripping away more than $40 million from research that would improve the lives of LGBTQ+ people in America. This award no longer effectuates agency priorities, states the termination letter her team received that she shared with The Observer. Research programs based on gender identity are often unscientific, have little identifiable return on investment, and do nothing to enhance the health of many Americans, the letter continued. The letter went on to claim, quote, many such studies ignore rather than seriously examine biological realities. When we return, I'll be joined by activist, author, speaker, and community leader Hope Giselle-Godsey. All right, and we are back with author and activist Hope Giselle. Hope, how are you doing? How is your trans day of visibility?
Busy. Busy, very busy.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about all the different things that are happening. Of course, we don't have to talk about every single issue that's going on, but we can start with Trans Day of Visibility, which was earlier this week. How do you think that this Trans Day of Visibility was a little bit different from ones in the past, if at all?
I can't speak to a general or a universal feel, but what I can say is that for me, it was a little different in the way that we had conversations and the way that we spoke about it. So I did a, a, a plethora of conversations that day, but the ones that I was leading, I had a conversation with Never Ending Nina and 2 a.m. Ricky around visibility for their new song T for T. And we were actually also able to talk about visibility as it pertains to, the music industry and folks who also dabble in activism and things of that nature. And talking about it from this lens of like knowing your community and understanding how visibility works across intersections was really, really dope. And something that I think that oftentimes on Transnet Visibility, we don't do. And then we also were able to kind of sort of move into another conversation that we had around the way that visibility is often only gifted to a certain subset of people. And especially when we're talking about like the public eye or like the big, the core 3 organizations that really help to like really push people within the queer community. And so we talked a little bit about like, visibility hoarding in that particular instance and sense. And then I also held a personal conversation with Laverne Cox on my platform. And her and I really talked heavily about legislation and the way that the government, right, is bringing visibility to trans people, but in a way that is helping to coax folks into this ideation that we're not people. And so we really talked about the consequences of what that looks like, and how, you know, government playing a part in visibility can sometimes really be a bad thing. And she even lamented a little bit about the fact that like visibility for a lot of the girls has become this double-edged sword that she helped to kind of sort of like unsheath, which was really interesting, and a beautiful, I think, set of accountabilities that I don't think that she has to hold on to, because I don't believe that we should apologize for our visibility. But I think the conversations and the way that I saw so many people having conversations around trans day visibility this year was a lot more uplifting, a lot more informational, a lot more didactic than we've seen it in the past. And I genuinely enjoyed that.
You said so many things that I want to touch on. I want to talk about first. You mentioned a term a term I'd never heard before, visibility hoarding, and that's really interesting to me. Who
Yeah.
who do you think who is hoarding access? Who's hoarding visibility? Is it the gatekeepers who are giving opportunity?
Well, I mean, I think that there are several people that are hoarding, or several organizational bodies that are hoarding. You know, I'm not one to mince words. I kind of sort of say the names, and that's typically why I get kicked out of the spaces. But as much as I love GLAAD, I was just at the GLAAD Honors. You know, thank you so much for the invitation. You know, shout out to Deshaun Usher, who is really spearheading that program and doing such amazing things for Black and Brown creators over there. But GLAAD is a gatekeeper, and GLAAD decides who gets to be, you know, an LGBT star, and who kind of sort of has to, you know, like teeter on the lines of obscurity. And then you have HRC. You know, HRC also gets to decide who are the voices and who gets to be an advocate, and who, you know, we look to for the words and the messages, and things of that nature. And then you also have a lot of like major donors. You have people within the donation space that also get to decide, you know, who stands up and who stands out, and which organizations are you know, going to get the most coin to be able to do the work that allows them to be, you know, seen by these folks. And I think that oftentimes those people look like whitewashed versions of, you know, folks like myself, or Ashley Marie Preston, or Queen Jean. And I say that specifically because we are the folks that are unafraid to name the names. You know, we're the folks that are unafraid to say the things that other people don't want to say, because they want to be invited to the GLAAD Awards, or because they want to be invited to the HRC Gala Dinner, and they want to, you know, be invited to the spaces where the, you know, upper echelon, you know, celebrities are being invited to. And so they're not going to speak out and say like, I love GLAAD, and also where's the Black representation that does not need to be whitewashed or watered down or censored in order to get into the space. You know, there are not a lot of people that are going to say like, HRC, this is great that y'all are doing this gala and this dinner, but how many times are we going to give Cynthia Erivo an award when we have Queen Jean that has been out here risking her life in the streets of New York, and not getting the proper representation from these major organizations for the things that she does, right? And I think that it's really it sucks and it's tough, because I think that when you are a true advocate and when you are a true activist, you have to decide whether or not you want to be considered one of the cool kids by the larger organization, or if you really genuinely want to do the work for the people. Because doing the work for the people oftentimes means that you have to criticize or critique the folks at the top, and that often leaves you as a pariah when it comes time, you know, for them to do acknowledgments. And it's unfortunate, but I think that, you know, all of the folks that I've named, we've decided time and time and time again that the work and the people and the advocacy is more important than being invited to the shows. And while I do get invited, I think even that sometimes can be performative, because I'm only invited because I said something about it, right? Like, I don't want to be invited because I said something. I want to be invited because there's not a lot of spaces that you can go to. There's not a lot of Black trans women that you can speak to. There's not a lot of Black people in general in advocacy space that you can speak to, and they don't know Hope Giselle or the work that I do. And I shouldn't have to curse y'all out and talk about that, or lay out my resume every single award season, for you all to see me, or for you all to say like, well, let's give her let's give her an invitation, because you know she gonna say something about it if we don't. Like, the Constellation Prize invitations are also a slap in the face. And so I think that when we talk about visibility hoarding, I think that we are also needing to be mindful of the fact that there are certain outlets that don't publish certain people. There are certain outlets that make a big stink about white creators or white trans folks doing the smallest things, when you have Black and brown trans folks that are out here literally going to jail over things. Or you have the people that are butt buddies with like some of these white gay men at the top of these organizations. And so, you know, they're going to get the coverage, but there's like this huge thing over here that the entire community is talking about, and nobody's going to know about it on the front of the allies who are following these major pages, because there is this visibility. It's like, the trans woman that we want you all to know about and the one that we like is this girl. The trans man that we think is respectable and passable and that we want you to gawk over is this one. And, you know, there's just a lot of that visibility hoarding from a lot of the major organizations and bodies and magazines and all of those things. It just, I think that I've spoken about it time and time again. You know, I had an entire rollout for my wedding that included 3 countries, 14 photo shoots, an entire magazine spread with, you know, Black Gay Weddings magazine. And none of that was covered by any of the major people. And considering my space and community, you would think that everybody would have wanted to know, like, where this came from. I'm one of the few Black trans women in community that's openly married to a Black man. And we did this entire thing, and the community had a whole, like, there was a lot of, you know, backing from community around it. And not a single reporter, they all follow me. Not a single magazine, they all follow me. Not a single organization, they all follow me, you know, reached out to have a story about it. And I just think that it's because when you platform certain people, you have to also understand that you're platforming their voices. And sometimes their voices have spoken out against you. And I think that the fear that you're going to be held accountable should not be worth more than actually platforming people who are doing the work. So, long form answer, but you know, that's what visibility hoarding looks like. And I think that there are a lot of people responsible for it in this industry.
It's a beautiful answer, and you do so much incredible work. And Queen Jane, who I love and have been lucky enough to like spend time with in real life, I'm so grateful to her. I have so many questions for you. I won't take up too much of your time, but I'm really curious. You know, we talked about the events and the awards. I was at GLAAD this past weekend as well, and you know, we're here on the Advocate Weekly, and the Advocate won Best Magazine at the GLAAD Awards. I'm curious though, for the people who keep their mouth shut or who play it safe and who teeter that line that you mentioned, because they do eventually want to enter those rooms, and maybe they have the best intentions. Maybe they say, when I am when I'm given that green light, when I'm given that cosign by these organizations, then my voice will have power and then I can do good real change. So what can people do from the outside? Can we dismantle the idea that you need to be in those rooms to make change?
Well, I mean, I think like let me be very clear. Yes. Right? Like when you are we are queer and trans people, and then when we think about the way that like all of the systems that affect like heteronormativity and the heteronormative spaces, they are tenfold within the queer space, which is even smaller. So when we think about the idea that Black and brown people in you know, the vast majority of the world, which happens to be heteronormative, have to fight for spaces in these rooms, and then you think about the microcosm that is the queer community, and the fact that Black and brown people still have to fight for space in those rooms, and then in order to be seen as valuable or valid, you have to be willing to bite your tongue and not say the thing and not be like, I hate the fact that, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm learning. I love education. I love language. I enjoy a code switch moment for the sake of being able to be accessible to everybody. But I should not have to hide the fact that every now and then I'm JT from the City Girls, right? I shouldn't have to hide the fact that every now and then I'm going to say, motherfucker, you got me fucked up as it pertains to some of these bills. Like, I shouldn't have to, you know, fold my arms and cross my legs and take the Laverne Cox or the peppermint approach to everything. And I think that even, you know, like when I spoke to Laverne, like one of the things that like I noticed is that lately in interviews, she's been having to say like, I'm just gonna go there, right? Because she's built this brand for so many years where she's just like been so buttoned up and so like, you know, well put together and not saying the things and not doing the things. And so it's just like sometimes when she has passion, she feels like she has to like do a disclaimer before she says like This shit is fucked up. And it's one of those things where I feel like, yes, we have to be in the room. Because if there's not a Hope, or if there's not a Queen Jean, or if there's not an Angelica Ross or an India Moore, or one of us that's genuinely just not afraid to say the thing in the room, then you're stuck with all of these people that, in my opinion, are part activist, part entertainer, and part sycophant, because they want the opportunity to continue to, like, be seen and be invited and be in these spaces. And you have people that are out here doing the real work. I think that for a lot of us, it's not the invitation because we want to necessarily win or because we expect you all to bow at our feet, but it's the invitation to let your hair down amongst your peers and enjoy yourself for once in the midst of all of the work that you do on a constant basis. Me and Jean would love to come and turn up and dance with Cynthia Erivo after, doing all of these damn protests and speaking our mind and almost going to jail and getting arrested every other weekend. Like, we would love to be invited to the spaces where the people get to just eat cupcakes and chat about the movie that just came out and give congratulations to the rest of our peers. But folks are too afraid that when we get there, we're going to say the hard thing. And so it's like, even though we respect your work from afar, we're never going to allow you the opportunity to say it to our face. And so I do think that it's important that we are in the room. I think that it's important that other people are in the room, because you need to understand that you cannot avoid accountability as organizations whose literal motto is to hold other people accountable for not seeing the queer community. When some of you all are actively not seeing specifically Black boisterous trans women because you don't want to be held accountable in real time. And it's sad. It's sad.
Yeah. You every response you give, and I know that it's not I know at some point it must be very normal. You hear it often. I've been on your lives. I've listened to you speak. I've heard the passion and felt energized by you and your words. But I'm just so grateful for you and the work that you do and the way that you can break these things down to help the rest of us understand. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, I was just on with advocate senior national reporter Christopher Wiggins. We were talking specifically about the way that the Trump administration is targeting trans people in the military. And he shared so much with me about statistics when it comes to trans service members, specifically the fact that trans people are more likely to serve in the military, which I did not know. I know that Angelica Ross is a veteran, so I'm curious, he talked about the way that the LGB in the LGBTQ plus community is being separated from the TQ plus. What, if any, message at all, because you may not want to say anything, but what message would you want to share with the LGB community? How do you think that people are responding?
I think that there are a lot of folks that are trying to stand in solidarity, and then there are a lot of folks that are trying to hold on to their piece of what they believe is going to be a life raft, right? I think that folks are not blind, they're not silly, they're not, slow by any means, and they kind of sort of see that right now trans people are being made the scapegoat. And so if they are finally, ignoring the gay people in the corner and ignoring the lesbian folks in the corner, it's a lot easier to kind of sort of disassociate for the sake of safety. And as a person who is navigated as a gay male, for my youth at least, I understand the need to like disassociate for the sake of not wanting to like be a part of whatever violence might befall the person that is the other in that particular situation.
Right.
However, I think that in this moment and with all of the information that all of us have gotten through COVID and the years past, as we've been learning so much more because we've had so much more opportunity and time, the idea of any separation within this queer community, right? The umbrella queer community just doesn't make sense. And I think that it's almost, well, no, it's not almost, it is most disrespectful for the separation to be the LGB from the T, considering that the TQ plus has always been at the forefront of every major change that has happened that has resulted in positive repercussions for the queer community. When we think about the fact that if it were not for Marsha throwing that brick There would be no pride for people to put on their harnesses and walk around half naked in the streets of New York. There would be no Stonewall Inn. There would be none of those things. There would not be an MPJI Institute for people to be receiving funds and all of these different things. And when you think about the idea that Stormy Delarvie, who was a mask affirming, what we would, I think, identify as a non-binary person these days, if it were not for Stormy backing and supporting Sylvia and Marsha, they would have probably been beaten by gay men. Right? So when we think about the history of our queer community, at the forefront of a lot of that, I know that a lot of you all don't know all of the names of the people that created space for queer people to be able to show up. But when we think about music and entertainment, Jackie Shane was the first Black trans woman to enter the space of music and win a Grammy. When we think about modeling, we're talking about box number 29, and we're talking about Lord Jesus, don't make me forget her, Tracy Africa, right? When we're thinking about the fact that this woman maneuvered and moved through the space as a model, a Black trans woman, right? But like bombarded this space very silently and turned it on its head and was ridiculously successful even through. And so I think when they rediscovered it and wanted to give her flowers again, that was like what, 2021 or something like that, when they brought her back. Like, we are the change makers and the trailblazers for community. And the idea that some people think that it's okay to say let them handle their own shit, when we got marriage equality off the ground, when we are the reason for a lot of these people creating these ERGs because they want to create a safe environment for trans people, which then, creates a safer environment for the LGB of the community. It's one of those things that it becomes a really disrespectful thing, the fact that there is a separation and the fact that people are thinking about whether or not this is the correct move. Because separating yourself from the freedom fighters of the movement seems like the dumbest thing that you could possibly do, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And, we often remind people, we've told people before, I've told people before that, like, when we were talking about Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris's politics and whether or not you supported her, but just using her as an example, as a jumping off point, any her or any politician who focuses on the most marginalized community, or the most marginalized among us, if you support that community, if you do things that uplift and affirm and keep that community safe, that's good for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that protecting Black women in general is good for everybody, right? Like, it doesn't, like, whether you're trans or not. I think that Black women in general, as it pertains to civil rights spaces, as it pertains to movements, as it pertains to anything that needs to get done, Black women are gonna do it, And I think that as it pertains to our community overall, Black trans women still hold true to that Black woman moniker. We're the mothers, we're the grandmothers, we're the sisters, we're the best friends, we are, the caretakers, we're the matriarchs of community. And in a lot of ways, people don't respect or understand how important that is until we're gone.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, looking forward as we head into Pride season, which is coming up, I already know there are a bunch of prides that have already lost money. There are prides that have said, their big corporate sponsors have already begun to pull out way ahead of time. But as far as the community, not looking at the parades, every year I remind people that Pride is and always has been a riot. How should the LGBTQ plus community approach this Pride? With so much happening, to me personally, it feels weird to say I want to be at a parade. It feels weird to plan to go party for a weekend.
There's a both and. People need rest, people need celebration, people need parties. But I think that as you move and as you maneuver through this Pride season, you have to go into it with the understanding and the with the understanding and the knowledge of the times that we're in now. And I think that if you go into your parade or your rallies or your activations with any less energy than you're about to go, to go see Shakira or to go see Doechii or to go see Janelle Monáe or whatever the case, or whoever you're going to go see this Pride season, you're doing yourself a disservice. We should not be giving more of our energy to celebrities that are helping us take the edge off than we are to the government, the system, and the people that are pretending to not see us. And so there's a both and. I want you to have fun. I want you to go and shake your ass. I want you to yell and scream for your favorite queer or accomplished celebrity. I want that for you. But I also need you to go and put boots on the ground and make yourself seen and make your community seen and make sure that these people know that you will not be erased and that pride is more than a party, right? But I don't want to take away the joy that people feel from being able to be in community with folks, during a specific time of the year that they can count on to not feel like an outsider. And so I want to just make sure that folks understand that while I encourage your party, I also want to invoke the spirit of your protest.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to just ask, you've said so many great things, and, you are someone that I look to as a leader in the community. And we've mentioned a bunch of incredible people. Queen Jean, I'll always amplify her name and her voice and the work that she does. What work can accomplices, as you call them, what work can we be doing in the community? What should we be looking for, big and small? How can we play our role as best as possible?
Do your research. Follow the folks and the people that are doing their due diligence to make sure that you have, resources and things. I love the work that you're doing, Kevin, by making sure that your information that you are spreading to the people, the masses, the world, the queer community, the heterosexual community is vast, and that you are going to get something from everywhere, right? You're going to learn about the Black struggle. You're going to learn about the Latina struggle. You're going to learn about the trans struggle. You're going to hear some triumphs. You're going to see some losses. And I think that it's important that any accomplice are doing their due diligence to follow the people that are making those things possible. Because when you are following these mainstream right-winged or even sometimes leftist pages, they have biases. When we, the activists, the people that are in community are working, we're doing this because we need our communities to be informed. And when that is the passion behind the art, the entertainment, the media, the news, you get a lot more out of that. And I think that they need to start there. And then after that, they need to think about what their access is and what their resources look like. It's not always about giving $1 million. Sometimes it's about being able to donate a building space for people to have their meetings. Sometimes it's about being able to donate computers or iPads for, up and coming nonprofits to be able to operate. Sometimes it's about being able to donate your volunteers, right? Like a lot of these organizational bodies or a lot of people out there just have people that are waiting and willing to do work for the cause. So why not donate those folks to do work for the cause that you are also passionate about? Your access and your resource does not stop at your pockets. While we love it, we require it. It does not stop there, And I think that the more that people follow these news sources and follow these people and follow these influencers and folks in the movement, they'll learn those things. And I think that that's, the best thing that an accomplice can actually do outside of showing up to be a shield when shit gets rough. It's not enough for you to say as an ally, like, I support you, can't wait to see you when you get back, versus being an ally who is like, when are we leaving? And do you need me to drive? Right?
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your effort. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can have you back on soon, and we'll have more things to talk about. Can you let people know before we go where they can follow you if they don't already?
Absolutely. So you can find me pretty much everywhere at Hope Giselle. It's not spelled funky, just HopeGiselle. Or you can visit my website. It has all of my links, which is just hopegiselle.com. And everything that you would want to know, need to know, booking information, merch, everything is there. So feel free to hit me up, do all the things, follow, hate watch, whatever you need to do. But that's where you can do it at.
That's all for this week's episode of The Advocate Weekly. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode. Make sure to subscribe to The Advocate Weekly wherever you get your podcasts, and if possible, please leave us a rating and a review. Until next time, I'm your host, Kevin Ortega-Rojas. Take care. To read more stories like the ones you heard today, go to advocate.com. This episode was executive produced by Kevin Ortega-Rojas. Special thanks to our associate producers Kayla Gagnet and Alex Cooper, and Eric Bowie for technical support. And special thanks to Advocate's senior national reporter Christopher Wiggins for joining me, and our special guest, Hope Giselle-Godsey.